Welcome to Dance to Heal. I'm your host, Jenny C. Cohen. Join me as I share stories of how dance and movement can bring healing in a way that is safe and tailored to your life. I'm a cancer survivor, mother of two, and an award-winning performer who found that movement was vital to my recovery. I created Dance to Heal Wellness and also authored the best-selling book, Outside in Recovery, Dancing My Way Back to Myself After Breast Cancer. I will bring new techniques to help you on your dance journey and healing path. Are you ready to move? Dance to Heal starts now. Dr. Eddie is a sport and performance psychologist and leads the Success Stories community. He specializes in overcoming obstacles to excellence like performance anxiety and perfectionism. Dr. Eddie is author of The Psychology of Performance, How to Be Your Best in Life. Although Dr. Eddie is a member of the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee Mental Health and Sports Psychology Training, he also works with athletes of all ages and levels, from youth to masters and from high school and club to professional. Dr. Eddie loves to work with high achievers in business, music, and the performing arts. So it is my utmost pleasure and honor. Dr. Eddie, thanks so much for coming on to the podcast.
Oh, super excited to be here. Can't wait to get into some of this information and help your listeners.
Yes. When I first started the podcast, it was from this perspective. I want to get back to my life after a medical treatment. And for a lot of my listeners, it's also includes people who just want to start moving again and or start to understand, oh, the life I have isn't necessarily what I want. And I would love for you to give some words of perspective on how a person can do that.
Well, boy, my head's exploding. There's lots of different ways. And let me ask you this, like my personal philosophy to excellence. And I work with everything from athletes and high performers in performing arts and business to a lot of health populations. And what I don't want to do is give you what you've already heard, like think positive and build your confidence and believe that you can and blah, 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 blah. Like it drives me insane because I know when I first got into the field, I tried that stuff and I didn't believe it. I tried thinking positively and I had demons. I had things in my head that tore me down. And I know that that's also the case when, if you're sick, or I worked with chronic pain, for example, and they didn't really respond well to that type of attitude. Like, what are you going to be positive about when you have something like chronic pain? When cancer shows up, like you're supposed to really look at the bright side. So my philosophy of excellence is really how do you overcome the obstacles to it? And this goes for when we have trauma and when we have difficulty, when we have challenges, but it even goes like if things are fine, because if you truly want to be excellent and get to the highest point, you have to be able to do what 99% of the other people either can't or won't. It's always going to be difficult. And so there's a certain amount of suffering and challenges that always get in the way. And my philosophy about excellence, living a good life or being an excellent athlete or having wonderful health and a wonderful marriage, it takes work. So let me put it back to you here for just a moment and say, with that in mind, maybe let's start off the conversation with what do you feel like is the biggest barrier that your listeners, are confronted with? And maybe we'll address that first.
Oh, I like this one. Thanks for turning it back to me, Dr. Eddie. A lot of times I have found we are not collectively even aware we have a worthiness issue. Deep down inside, if we're asked, for me personally, and a lot of times I attract the same type of person with this inability to look at doing things for the sake of ourselves. So you talk about excellence, right? I've parented my children through homeschooling, elite sports, without hesitation. It was the looking at myself under a microscope and going, whoa, where do I figure into the equation? Any of the listeners that are tuning into this show are not even aware they haven't put themselves first. That's what I would love for you to give them a key to starting down this path, because the path to excellence oftentimes starts with a question you ask yourself first, right? So I was able to help coach my kids to junior Olympic gold and silver medals because they were very clear where they wanted to serve their excellence. And I made that possible for them because I was their parent and I was fully dedicated to that. For myself, after the breast cancer recovery started, that was a very hard question to even ask myself. And it
Mhm.
wasn't for myself, the motivation didn't even happen until one of my children went into full distress. And I realized I am not present enough to even keep them safe. And that's what motivated me in that direction. What do we do with our listeners who don't have the outward motivational factor? How we get these listeners, people who actually I work with, how would you start with them?
Well, the first thing you said was worth. So when we talk about motivation and all these other things, it's like, well, let's back the truck up and say, okay, what is my worth dependent on?
Mhm.
And it's interesting that you had said that too, because very quickly, my story was that I earned my worth. I learned young that I had to achieve. It's probably why I became a doctor. um, but I had to achieve in sport. I had to achieve in fitness. And I felt like it's just sort of a protective mechanism. There was a lot of illness and other things that went on in my family. And I just had a lot of fears of abandonment. And so I felt like, well, if I could earn approval, I could earn love, and I could prevent people from running away. And so my worth was then dependent on, again, fitness, achievement, like a whole bunch of things. I mean, I had to achieve in every area. And then I had a midlife crisis because that doesn't work. You can't achieve worth. You just can't, because whatever's good enough for the time, even if you achieve it, I would never found satisfaction in my achievements, because it was like, okay, good, I did that. And what's next? Because it's this endless treadmill and it's exhausting. So personally, for me, my shift was, my spirituality. I'm a strong Christian and became much stronger in that. And there's a whole belief system underneath that. The benefit of that was that, by putting my faith in God, he defined what my worth was, and it was because I was made. So I certainly recommend that, but I won't turn this into a spiritual lecture. But with everybody else, in respect to all beliefs and all systems, the idea here is you have to kind of say, well, do I know where I'm getting my worth from? And so I will say, for example, when I work with athletes, when they have to perform well because their worth is dependent on their batting average or their championship or winning that scholarship, they find the same frustrations that I did in that sense of achievement. So every athlete that, I work with, when I find that it's up to their performance and they're earning their worth, you can't do that. It's too heavy to, how hard it is to run a marathon carrying that weight on your back? My swimmers will sink, and I make these metaphors, but it's true. Like, you're sinking under the weight of this pressure. Businesses, health, the whole thing, when we have it to this external. So what's worked really, really well is to ask that question. Well, where does my worth come from? And that's going to be different for everybody. Some people kind of say, well, gosh, and maybe I turn to what we call my values. Well, who's the person that I want to be? How do I want to live my life? Like, what's the character? And this I have found across disciplines. And again, let me also add my work with chronic pain, for example. People have lost their identities. Like, they can't be the father they used to be, the provider they used to be. They're not the mother that they want to be. They're the spouse. Their functions have decreased as a result. They can't go back to the employment that they had. Their identity was wrapped up in their employment. Again, you see versions of it's all about what I do. And when I can't do it anymore because of health or something else, now I've lost my worth. And I've just never seen it work long term for anybody. What's great is that outside of the spirituality, if you get sort of the character, you can do that no matter what sport you're in, however old you are, whatever your health is. If I value generosity and honesty and intimacy, I can do that every day. And it might be hard, and there's certainly a challenge with it. But if I know that's what I am, and I lean into that more so, I can still, no matter how much my back hurts, be honest with the people around me. I can still value these relationships no matter how anxious I'm feeling. And we are in control of that. We are in control of living our values, of the way that we want to live. And so If my worth then is based on me being consistent with my values, then I have a much greater success of achieving that despite the adversity that goes on. And so I would say that would be step one, is to find a way to get an exercise to clarify those values. Because once you have clarity, then it provides you a direction, kind of like a compass. It's not a goal. You never achieve it. And it's under your control. Nobody can take that away from you. So I would start there.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love that. That's certainly a discussion I have often with my son, who's a ballet major. And a lot of times, because my children were both elite athletes and no longer pursuing that, where a lot of their worth was measured in the medals they brought back to their coach or their awards when they were in competitive dance. And now to step into understanding how value can be tied in with their worth, especially in this day and age, right, Dr. Eddie? There's so many things happening outside, and it's very easy to be swayed by that and forget, oh, you got to anchor to your values first before you find out or even look at what's happening outside. I love that. I really do.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that point up. That's critical, because it's one thing to say that, but with all of you listening, like, I knew that the values of whether it be Christianity or of, my own heart, that wasn't enough, because then there was culture that I originally got these values of achievement from. Like they have the on ESPN, top plays of the week. They don't kind of say who was the best person. We talk all the time about how important it is to be kind, but you see no reinforcement of kindness in the world. You don't see it in your relationships, at school, at work. It's constantly being rewarded about who's the best looking, who's the strongest, who's the fastest, who has the most money. Power and all of that, those cultural things that are around us are constantly being reinforced. So for me to kind of say, like, okay, my value is not in my body, it's not in my actions, it's not my achievement. But yet 25 hours a day, people are rewarding, hey, you look great today. Wow, you're really getting fit. Did you drop 5 pounds? Wow, you're a doctor. Like, that's awesome. And wow, you sound really smart today. And, it was very confusing and very hard to let go of what culture keeps telling me every day. And it's still bombarding. And I'll tell you, I'm not locked in 100% to my values and living a perfectly valued life. Every day, I have to kind of deal with my own draw being pulled back and saying, am I listening to others? And there's been a lot of consequences in my life, as I imagine in many others. And it's really that pain of finding out all the losses that I had when I chased the cultural ideals. I've never seen it work. I've seen it work really well in the short term. Mm-hmm. Like, let me be clear about that. But in the long term, I've seen so much more distress if we don't really get aligned with our values.
Right. Yes. One of the things that you love to be asked is, what to do when positive thinking doesn't work, and I would love for you to touch on that, because I feel like this is a perfect jumping point into that. Because sometimes I can hold on to my value, be kind all day, be kind to people, remember what kind of day they're having. And then and I'm sure the listeners will have those days where it's moment after moment of that being tested, and positive thinking doesn't work sometimes. And what do we do when that happens?
Yeah. So yeah, right. It is one of my favorites, because going back to culture and how I think it hurts us, if you want to kind of get some self-help stuff, the amount of articles and videos and everything else that comes out there is going to tell you to be positive, look at the bright side, maintain your optimism. I have a lot of athletes or performers that come in with the specific request about how to think positive so they can feel confident, so that they can play well. So you're going to the Olympics. Am I supposed to teach you to think positive and think that you're going to win and beat literally everybody else in the entire world? Are you not supposed to be nervous about this? Or even if it's just your average day and you're concerned about your finances or your spouse or your kids, am I supposed to tell you, well, just think positive in this horrible world where terrible things happen every day? The reason you can't think positive is because we don't live in a positive world, and your brain is too smart to fall for that. Now, I'm not against positivity when it works. Like, when optimism works, and by works, I mean, does it allow me to move in the direction that I want to go? Because that's what ultimately matters. It's our actions in this world that matter the most. So are our thoughts and beliefs, everything from worth to positive thinking, If I think that I'm really, really worthy and I'm awesome, I've got high self-esteem and I'm thinking positively, most people would say, good, that's where you need to be. Is it? Because I've seen a lot of arrogant, narcissistic people with that attitude. I've seen a lot of people doing a heck of a lot of damage out of being selfish and self-centered with that positive attitude. And I've seen people go in way overconfident and do a really crappy job because they were thinking so positively and they weren't in tune with what was actually going on. On the flip side, I was in the gym just the other day and I was kind of too relaxed. So I was kind of beating myself up. I was like, come on, you wimp, like pick up the damn weight. Let's go. Quit screwing around. And some people, I posted this on social media. Some people were like, hey, like what were you doing there? That goes against like what we think. And I'm like, well, first of all, I did it with a heart of loving kindness, right? You still want to be kind to yourself. But I was like, I also expected more from myself and I needed a kick in the butt. And so people were like, it was negative, or sometimes I'll call myself a name or I'll criticize myself. And if it works, it's okay to do it because it's working. So number one, the lesson in this little ramble is for those who are listening is to not get too caught up in am I being positive or negative, right or wrong, true or false. The best question you can ask yourself is what I'm saying to myself right now helping me and moving me forward in the direction that I want to go, or does it hold me back? You might find that a lot of negativity moves you forward and a lot of positivity holds you back. So don't worry about the content of it. Look at the function of it. And that's why I say positive thinking doesn't always work. Because first of all, if you're thinking negative, if you have anxiety, now look, if there's panic attacks and things like that, there's levels of distress. But please don't think that the nervousness, the sadness, the upset, the lack of motivation, that there's anything wrong with you or broken. If you've got cancer and you're frustrated, you should be. If you're sad because you've lost your job, you should be. People are telling you to get over it. That's ridiculous. Like, let's get rid of this. Let me have a quick question for everybody. Turns out that the research shows that we have got really just 4 basic human emotions. We used to think there were a whole bunch. The more recent research was like 6 or 7, but they've narrowed it down through these facial recognition studies a number of years ago. Amazing, smart people, biological determinants of we've got 4 basic human emotions. Can we guess as to what they are, Jenny?
Fear.
Yes, 1.
Anger.
2.
Is it shame and guilt? No, that's just only fear.
No, that kind of goes into one of the other categories.
Yeah. What I've got fear and guilt. What are the other 2 that I'm missing?
Happy. You missed a good one.
Yeah, that tells you where I'm at. was the 4th one?
Sad. The opposite of happy.
Yeah.
But you went like kind of 2 and 2. But let's go here. Happy, sad, mad, and scared. How many of those feel good?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, 1. So let's pause here for a second. I have 4 things that I could possibly feel as a human being throughout my entire life. Only one of them I like. And we pathologize anytime anybody shows something of the other 3. Every time I'm mad, I'm told to calm down. Every time I'm scared, I'm told to don't worry about it. Every time I'm sad, people don't tolerate it. They try to cheer me up. We have such an intolerance of these other things, except when my parents died, I should be sad. I had an uncle, I remember hugging me and say, oh, don't worry, they're in a better place. Is that supposed to make me feel better? I know they're in a better place and crying for me. With all the injustice we see in this world, are we really not supposed to get angry about it? Feel the anger, channel it in a way it gives us energy in order to do something about it. And are we really not supposed to be scared in this world today? If I care about something, my head is going to say, I'm giving it the power to hurt me. So I have to be scared. It's how do we respond to that warning, that very healthy anxiety that our body gives us, or that our mind tells us. And then how do I choose my reaction to that? And where it goes back to my point, I don't have to worry about my thinking and feeling. What I've moved to is a sense of what am I doing every day in a valued way based on my values to take action to myself in the direction that I want to go. And honestly, people out there, it's a grind. And if you want to know how to make it not a grind or make it easier, you're going to have to go somewhere else because I'm not going to be able to tell you.
Well, they can work with us, Dr. Eddie.
Well, that's the thing. But working with us doesn't necessarily make it easier. I say that right away. I don't give people the illusion that if you come to me, I'm going to make you feel better. I'm going to say, I'm going to teach you how to work differently and interact differently with these unpleasant feelings so that you can achieve more. Mm-hmm. But I never want to give the illusion that I'm going to make you feel better. Now, as gravy, when you're achieving what you want and you're moving towards your goals and you're living your values, you tend to feel better. So But that's not the point. If that's the point, then we get into these things that we call, here's a real science term, but experiential avoidance. I don't like the bad things. I don't like what's uncomfortable. So I run away and I want to go do something more pleasurable. Well, that's often in the other direction of where our values are. Relationships, for example, are difficult. Fitness is difficult. Excellence in my career is difficult. Health is difficult.
The difficulty is what makes it worthwhile, right, Dr. Eddie? Because what human nature is, we take for granted things that are easy. We take for granted things that come without some type of struggle. My kids fully value all the years they put into training to become junior Olympians, and the skills they learned in that endeavor, they still have brought forth even now, 10 years after they've stopped that very rigorous training. That has really, really benefited them. So I do want to assure people it's worth the work you put in. It really is. And at the same time, I really like the breakdown of those 4 emotions, Dr. Eddie, because here's the thing. It wasn't until I fully allowed myself to feel those 3 feelings that were what we perceive of as negative before I could actually fully appreciate what happy was. You know, you were saying we run away from unpleasant things. You're darn right I did. I did run away from unpleasant feelings. I was never allowed to express anger as a child. Anytime I ever expressed anger, and I remember it to as far back as when I was 2 or 3, it was you're just being like your dad. And that was a negative thing. No one's allowed to express anger in my family. So when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I wasn't allowed to express my frustration at the treatment. The way I became a slab of meat for the medical people taking care of me, even though I fully trusted them. And individually, they were very kind. As a unit, it's a very dehumanizing experience to go through that treatment. And I wasn't even allowed to mourn the loss of the perception of the person I thought I was until I started my recovery process. And then it became, wow, I'm allowed to be angry. Ooh, that's dangerous. You know, and I found that it wasn't dangerous. It actually allowed me to identify the other feelings associated with that were not healthy for my body. So you got to identify it to release it. And now when I'm happy, I genuinely can appreciate it. Prior to the breast cancer, my kids telling me about events I don't remember because I wasn't even there in my lifetime with these miracles that I got from IVF. There's certain memories I don't remember because I wasn't present. I think the crux of it is, right, if you're present, even through the tough stuff, you get to treasure every moment of this life.
Well, you're hitting so many nuggets here. I hope I can remember all of the points that I want to bring up. One, you're hitting really, really well this concept of willingness. That's essential to the clients that I work with. Because as we talk about, well, if this is going to be difficult, we have to learn how to open up around that. And it goes beyond, we used to call it acceptance, but that kind of gets a bad thing because then it feels more like resignation. But what we're really talking about is a welcoming it in, like a making peace with the idea that, you know, pain and suffering are a part of this life, and no requirements to be okay with it or like it. And that's what you talked about, is like you kind of opened up to the reality of that experience, which allowed you to engage it. That brings up the second point, is that as we kind of say these things and it's worth it and whatever, please, listeners, don't fall into like, well, because it's worth it, then I don't have a right to not like it. Like, it's going to be this coexistence of really holding on to and staying angry and staying sad and staying anxious, because you have every right to feel those feelings. And if you are having those feelings right now, there's nothing wrong with you. There is a darn good reason why you are feeling them. And to try to deny them or change them is going to distract you so much and take up so much energy, and it won't work. Now, I'm not saying that if you're depressed, you can't ever get out of depression. What we also know about emotions is that they come and go. And of course, there's a lot more. I want to be really sensitive to the idea for mental health and these other things, that I'm not trying to normalize every extreme of these things. But if you feel like when we're kind of giving these tidbits of like, you know, trying to turn it into the positive or look at the other benefits of it, please know that it's not to then the exclusion of the negativity at the same side. We're really holding them in balance. We're holding them next to each other. And I want to really double down on, to finalize my little rant here, is I want to ask you sort of another question. Let's say, for example, I was going to give you $2 million. And the only thing you have to do is just go out, and the next stranger that you see, I want you to fall madly in love with them. Would you be able to do that? Well, I imagine you'd be able to go outside, and whoever it is, him or her, you could go up and hug them and kiss them. You could even marry them, and you could say you love them, and you could act like it. But would you really be able to control the emotion of deep love for them? No, you can't fake it. And that's an obvious example, but what that lets us know is we do not control emotions. So for all of that culture coming full circle, telling us to have emotional control, that's the wrong phrase. We choose our reactions to our emotions. You had said that anger was frightening. I have a lot of people that can be scared by their anger. Why? Because they're afraid of what they'll do with that anger. But I want to encourage you and say those are two different things. You have every right to be angry. I'm sure something bad happened to you, something unfair. You can be angry about it. Where we want to have the control is what is under our control, which is our behaviors and what we do and how we respond to this anger. When we get all caught up and think that our thoughts and feelings are going to determine what we do, it's a lie and it's actually not true. And I'll prove it to you. Jenny, I'm asking you another question, putting you on the spot.
Let's go.
If you did everything that ever crossed your mind and you acted on every urge you have ever had, where would you be right now?
In jail.
That's right. And I get one other popular answer. If not jail, where else?
In the hospital? Dead? In heaven?
That's the other answer. So I've asked this of 8-year-olds all the way up to 80-year-olds and everybody in between. I've asked this question of clients thousands and thousands of times. And everybody gives the same answer. And that proves something to us because it's true. We ignore thoughts and feelings all day. I know as soon as my alarm wakes up in the morning, my first thought and urge is to stay in bed. And most of the time I don't. Sometimes I give in to the thought and the urge, which hence the struggle of life. But then the rest of the day is me actually not going according to what my thoughts and feelings are saying. They're intentional. And when these negative thoughts or unhelpful thoughts or difficult feelings show up, I can practice what's my response to them. That's a skill set that we can practice. That's what we do in my Success Stories community. It's what you do in your work as well. And that's where it is. We develop what we call this psychological flexibility where, full circle, we can learn how to respond to the thoughts and feelings that are difficult, be present in the moment, like you had said, have this real clarity of what's important to us and act in a committed way towards that. And that's the formula for success.
So we've run out of time, and I'm really glad you talked about your community. How can the listeners get in touch with you, Dr. Eddie, and check out what it is that you're working with?
Sure. Thank you for that invite. It's I'm really excited about it, looking for a lot of growth, particularly in this year. It's really going to be the crux of my work. So I created Success Stories community because of these lessons that I was teaching. I was honestly getting frustrated teaching people one-on-one. I was like, I'm not going to change the world this way. I can't help enough people. So I created this online platform where everything, if you've liked what we've heard about today, is opened up in a modular format where you can kind of come into this community and you can pick and choose which direction do I need to go in order to meet my needs. And then we've also got interaction with the other members as part of the community to give you support along the way. Ultimately, it's a great place for the training, but more importantly, for the implementation to change the way that you're interacting with the stuff that's holding you back so that you can achieve your goals. It's got a sort of an athletic flavor. I'm a sports psychologist. I like to talk about performance. I use a lot of sport examples. And I have a fair amount of athletes, both young all the way up through master's level. And I've got some 60, 70-year-olds who are still grinding and working at big goals. But I also have others that have health goals. And I've had artists in here and performing artists. So it's been really a great community that if you value high achievement and there's something that's kind of getting in your way and you want to be able to respond to those internal struggles more effectively, this is a great place to join the community. And it's at my website, dreddieoconnor.com/membership. Maybe we'll have a link or something. But it's open and I'd love to welcome you on the inside and walk along you on this journey and help you get where you want to go.
That's amazing. Thank you for that generous offer Audience, remember you have Dr. Eddie O'Connor and also myself, Jenny C. Cohen. You'll go to the description. You can access his membership and also have access to the free class that I'm making available to you under danceandheal.com. Dr. Eddie, thank you so much for coming. We're going to have you come back, okay? Because I feel like we've only touched the iceberg of all the things we plan to talk about.
That's actually true. I can't believe it's over already, but yeah, I'll be back.
Yes, you'll be back. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time, folks. Bye. Thanks for listening to Dance to Heal with Jenny C. Cohen. Come back next time to hear stories of recovery through movement and learn more ways that you can move your body. To work with me and continue your journey, visit OutsideInRecovery.com. Are you ready to move?